You can tell you've got IT stuff. Look at you. You look very professional, Justin. Very good. I'll leave it to you.
Thanks so much, Amanda. Wow, thrilled to be back presenting at Food South Australia. Thank you for that warm welcome. First time presenting in a digital capacity. It's going to be interesting. For any of you unlucky enough to sit through one of my presentations before, you know I get a bit excited and I talk a little bit fast. So yeah, maybe just on the message say slow down, calm down even. But we're hopefully going to have a bit of fun. I'm going to try and talk to us about what's really happening and the 4 big key trends or pillars or recommendations to win in a recession. I'd just say thanks again for having me. Really, really happy to be part of this. And hopefully everything just works as it should. I'm going to try and click to my next slide. I'm going to first take control and then that should work. Let's see. Hey, look at that. Okay, so here we are in the world of COVID-19. You're looking at a really, really busy chart. Apologies, I'll explain it. So who would have thought in January and February this year, when we were sort of just coming to terms with the bushfires, that we would enter this whole new world, that, you know, a couple of months later we'd be locked down, we'd be isolating. What started out as just a bit of anticipation and nervousness about what was then incorrectly known as the China virus, moved through to sort of survivalism, where we were pantry stocking, we were panic purchasing, we were avoiding people on the street. Toilet paper became currency. It was a really, really bizarre time for us. And that, as you can see, was when those new cases were really peaking and spiraling out of control almost. As the recovery started coming through and we went into lockdown, we moved into this phase we refer to as cocooning. So for many of us, we were working from home. I'm coming to you from my spare room right now. We were isolating. Our leisure opportunities were cut short. We were told to stay at home. Pubs, bars, restaurants. So in this cocooning phase, that's when life became the center of home. I'm just going to check. Apologies, guys, that I can see if anything pops up on the chat. Cool, we're good to go. So we entered this cocooning phase. Home life is the most important aspect, and we sort of learned new things. We were cooking more. We were picking up those DIY projects. You know, when you're stuck at home, that project, that leaky faucet, that fixed incorrect laundry becomes such a bugbear that we saw an increase in that. Streaming services also saw a significant increase. From there, we're now in this sort of readjustment phase where we're looking at our options. You know, some restrictions have lifted. I've been to the gym for the first time in 3 months. Thank you very much for the comment about my possibly toned body. I will pretend that it is true. We are starting to embrace old activities and pleasures. And as we move into this new era, as we might enter a recession, it's not going to be back to normal. And I can't stress this enough. There is no back to normal. There is only a new normal. You, your business, your consumers, everything has changed. And what we're going to see now is a blending of the old and the new. We're going to bring forward some of those behaviors that we learned in lockdown and during the readjustment period into this revival. So it's an incredibly difficult time for us in the food and beverage industry. Let's see if that works. Great. So to just really drive home the point, and apologies, the slide looks a little bit busy for you guys there, but I'll talk you through it. The key things I'm trying to talk about here is during 2 waves of consumer research, we found that, you know, the first wave in about April and then the second wave in May, we found that second wave, only 74% of Australians still indicated a change of habits in terms of how they shop. Everyone knows we saw that massive increase in online shopping, where Coles and Woolies eventually had to suspend online shopping because they couldn't keep up with demands. On the right-hand side, well, I think is the right-hand side, we asked consumers, have they been doing anything differently during the past week to bring joy, reduce stress? And 84% have still indicated a change of habits. So just to reiterate how much we have changed every aspect. And if we think about how our shopping's changed, we know that what's important to consumers in this day and age is that almost 60% really like that hand sanitizer or the wipes available on entry. Gone are the days of queuing to get into a nightclub. I now have to queue sometimes to get into my local Woolworths, which is a bit of a stark contrast. No longer cash. Cash is dead. It's all about contactless payment. I myself am quite conscious of not placing my card on the e-reader, just holding it a little bit away so I decrease that risk, I suppose. And what went up overnight, those I'm sure you've all seen them, those plexiglass dividers to protect the cashiers from us or protect us from the cashiers. I'm not so certain. These were all incredibly important for consumers in the age of shopping and COVID, and less so was the requirement to pack your own bags. It seems we were still quite partial to someone else packing our bags for us. But if we look at how this has sort of impacted across the different demographics, a lot of you will be familiar with IRI's panel of home shoppers and things like that. So we've actually then asked them, do they feel that their financial situation is better off or worse off versus a year ago? And as expected, you can see the majority there of about 48% expected it to be worse off. Now, apologies, I may have to pause here because I can't see my slides anymore. And I do need them. I might jump to the next slide and hoping it will load. Sorry guys, bear with. I'm just hoping my slide will load. Because my next slide is going to be a breakdown of the states and their attitudes. All right, I seem to be back. Sorry about this, guys. I may have to jump through again. Presenting in the age of isolation. Just take control. Back on track. Alrighty, there we go. I'm going to pause for a second just to make sure that I'm okay. Everyone can hear me, I hope. Josh, my amazing IT guy, or Amanda, let me know if I should stop.
Yep. Oh, we've got you. We
Awesome.
have got
Thanks,
you.
Guys.
You're looking.
Let's
and
try
can
that
I
again.
just say that was
now what we're looking at is a breakdown of pessimism by state. So you can see, all right, I'm based in Sydney. We'll talk about New South Wales, the largest sort of economy. It's pretty pessimistic. So on the left-hand side, you're looking at the people that feel worse off. And what's interesting is that it almost exactly matches the sentiment, here in South Australia. And then on the right-hand side, we're looking at that who believes that next year they're going to be as bad. So what the point we're trying to make here is that you've got a pessimistic consumer. Nearly half the Australian population does not have a good outlook for the financial situation right now, as well as their financial situation next year. They're expecting the impacts of COVID, the recession, things like that, to have lingering effects, because many of us would have sort of lived through it in 2008, 2009 GFC. So when we ask consumers how they're feeling and things like that, we can confirm now that 45% have felt household income is at risk in April. It may not necessarily be right now at risk. So there are still 37% of households that saying that their income has not been affected. Those of us that have been lucky enough to not be reduced hours or stood down or even had our work terminated, but there is still 45% of the Australian population that is feeling that impact. And this is important to you as manufacturers because you now have a completely segmented or different market. Half of them are okay and are still a little bit pessimistic perhaps, and the others have been impacted. So your shopper has changed. And who's going to benefit from this? Who tends to benefit during tough times or a recession is private label. If we look at some of the consumer research there, we see that 61 now in 2020, 61% of Australians believe that retailer or private label products are a good alternative to branded products. When we're penny pinching, when we're worried about our expenses, things like that, we're even more inclined to try a private label brand. And you can see there's been a slight increase on that versus 2017. So unfortunately, the bad news for brands does continue. There's this sort of apathy that's sort of come about. If we look at some of the consumer research, when we asked consumers if a brand goes away tomorrow, would people even care? And an overwhelming 77% said no. Meh, that apathetic. No, I don't really care. And this is more in the sort of consumer packaged goods space. We're not talking about high-end electronics or designer labels, but in our sort of world. On the right-hand side, that you can see that the name of the brand I buy is important to me. And in 2015, it was about 41% that were still brand conscious. But in 2018, the last time we asked that question, was only 32%. So there's a decreasing importance of brands in our area. And now when we're penny pinching, when we're worried about our expenses, consumers will be even more inclined to try a private label product. So, as I said, a lot of us worked through the last GFC, and there's a lot of learnings that we can take from that'll help us get through the next possible recession. We are lucky that FMCG spend is less discretionary. People have got to eat, they've got to clean their houses, they've got to buy groceries. They may change groceries that they buy, but they've still got to buy groceries. At the time, there was a bit of a boom in terms of commodity pricing. And the third one was that, and I'm gonna talk about this a lot today because I think it's so important, is that a recession can set a very dangerous precedent to price one-upmanship, and where you as manufacturers just think the best way to get through this is to decrease pricing, and our recommendation is completely opposite to that. But we'll talk more about that a bit later. I also wanted to talk about the fact that we're going to keep some of the behaviors. It's not just the DIY projects or everyone cooking sourdough or, home haircuts, maybe not home haircuts. But you can see here, when we ask consumers their anticipated meal preparation change after the virus, 66% of Australians are going to continue to create meals from scratch. So this is good news. If you are one of those manufacturers or brands that have seen an uplift in your purchasing during that stockpiling, people cooking more, you may see a continued uplift as people continue to use your product to prepare that meal, because 66% of us are going to be maintaining that. I know personally I've been cooking now more than ever, and I've also started to enjoy it a bit more. So on to the next session in terms of how to prepare for a recession, how to win through the recession. The lessons from previous years, when we look at the research that was done there, is that we encourage you to be proactive and to move quickly. Don't just wait. It is very, very difficult to do, but our encouragement is to take that leap. And we'll talk about 4 key pillars that we're recommending you to do or to take action on. Now, apologies, guys, this is such a busy slide, but it's my justification slide. We're looking at case studies here from the 2008-2019 recession in America. And these were 5 examples of companies that doubled down, they invested, they moved forward, they spent more during a recession, and it actually worked out really, really well for them. I will share a copy of the presentation so you can get more into the detail, but basically Coca-Cola invested in emotional connectivity, saw between a 4% and 6% year-on-year growth. Gillette doubled down on innovation, gained 40% top-line sales. Budweiser invested in their flagship brands, about a 3% organic growth. Colgate grew its advertising spend during the last GFC in America by about 7%. And they also doubled down on innovation. Excuse me. Do you remember the Colgate Wisps, those teeny tiny, bizarre little toothbrushes? Not really around anymore, but at the time it was something to talk about. It was something other than the recession to talk about. It was a novelty. And then Nivea also invested heavily in the male grooming or male beauty segment, and that delivered about 4% growth for them. On what I think is this section, left or right, I'm getting myself confused. You can see that their value change between 2008 and 2009, and they all delivered astronomical growth. So as I move into these recommendations and my 4 pillars, this is why, because we've looked at previous recessionary behavior, and these are the common things that they've done. So that's my sort of backup slide to guarantee what I'm talking about is in fact real stuff. So the 4 things we're going to talk about, the 4 trends or 4 pillars to help you win through this recession, is first and foremost price. Use price to maintain your brand. Don't get dragged down into a price war because it'll take you a long time to recover. I've alluded to it already, but marketing. Don't go quiet. Actually step up, be present, show that you're there with your consumer. And we're going to show some, I'll talk about some examples of manufacturers that have done that well. No surprises. The guy from a big research company is telling you to spend more on research, but I do genuinely believe this because your consumer has changed so much and you need to understand what their priorities are and their behaviors. And then the 4th one will be around range, streamlining your range, putting your best foot forward, but also not to underestimate the importance of NPD. I'm going to take a very quick pause there to have a sip of water, and I'm also just going to ask for sound check, feedback, pace. It's very weird presenting with no feedback.
Am I on? Yes, I am. Justin, we're all loving you. Don't worry, we're all gripped and absolutely loving it, and you look good, and the slides are working, and it's all fine. How's that for your feedback? You happy?
Oh, Amanda, you made my day. Thank you so much. I'm wearing a collared shirt for the first time.
I can't hear you though.
Shave,
that's the thing.
But I am wearing my Ugg boots, so this is a first for me.
Have you got your Ugg boots on?
Cool. We'll keep going then. I'll just wait for that the slides to catch up, and I'll talk to pricing. So as I've sort of spoken about before, the natural reaction in a recession or in a recessionary mindset is to think that, oh, 46% of Aussies are feeling it tough. They're doing it hard. What I'm going to do is decrease promotional activity and just increase my promotional activity and do buy one, get one free, or do a really, really significant promotions, or just decrease the base price. And we can't stress this enough. This is the wrong behavior. What you need to do is communicate value beyond price, why they should be supporting your brand now more than ever. So the importance of pricing is critical. So avoid this mindset of just everything needs to be cheaper. Let's get into a price war with our branded competitors. That's the wrong thing to do, because when the recession is over, it'll take you that much longer to rebuild not only your base price, but also consumers' perceptions of your brand if you damaged it by devaluing it so significantly now. And each category and brand will be different. So it's important to understand the elasticity. Now, again, super busy slide. I'm sorry, guys, but what I'm looking at here on what should be the left-hand side is a base category, price elasticity. So this is just looking at, for every 1% change in your shelf price, this is the expected uplift your sales will increase by. So as you'd expect, things like bone health, pregnancy vitamins, cosmetics, and butter are relatively inelastic at a base price level, meaning if you change the price there, you're not going to have a big uplift, versus some of the other categories like flavored milks, more impulsive perhaps. On the right-hand side, you're now looking at your promotional elasticity. So when on promo, if you change the price of, say, energy drinks by 1%, you can expect a 9.6% sales increase. So what we're trying to stress here is you need to understand the elasticity of your brand and your category at a base price, but also at a promotional price. Now, I know there's a lot of very smart people in the room, the virtual room attending, and you'll be familiar with this. The point we're trying to make here is that now, during a recessionary mind frame or time period, the elasticity of your brand, of your category may have changed. So the recommendation is to understand what will the response be to base price or promo price changes. And once you've got that, you'll be plotting it in this really nifty grid that the guys in our pricing, our advanced analytical consulting team have done. I'm sure most of you will be familiar with this, but I'll talk you through it very quickly. And again, you'll get a copy of the presentation. But say, for example, you've got a low promotional reaction and a low base price reaction. That means you really need to protect your price. That means conserving your trade dollars. You've got to maintain your communications and look at your NPD strategy, things like that. It's quite it's a difficult place to be in. On the flip side, if you're in that sort of high promotional reaction and a really high base price reaction, you're more in the quality frequency. And then you've got to find that beautiful equilibrium of price and promo, things like that, as opposed to maybe the high-low strategy or the EDLP strategy. Again, now with a recessionary mindset, you need to understand the elasticity to understand where you should play. So beyond price, we're talking now about value. How do you communicate value to your clients or to your consumers? It's all about what they're going to get beyond just cheaper products. A really great example that we saw from the UK is from Bachelors. I'm sure many of you will seen them. They're sort of instant meals. Pour in a boiling water and you've got pasta and sauce or noodles. Now, what they've done is I think, rather brilliant. In the time where we're at home, we've seen a surge in people in the online gaming community, and they've matched that. They've done a limited edition to tie into the release of the latest TV game, Final Fantasy. I shouldn't call it a TV game. It's an online game, giving away my age there and how very uncool I am when it comes to things like that. But it's another way to show value. I mean, we don't typically see this type of marketing for online games on mainstream packaged goods. But if you think about a gamer who's at home, they may very well be this brand's target market. Cool. So that was our first pillar, all around pricing and the importance of it. The next one I'm going to talk around is marketing. So the importance to keep chatting, avoid going dark, maintain the relationship with your consumer, be out there. In many cases, advertising is cheaper during a recession because less manufacturers are doing it. So we're saying capitalize on this, take advantage of the cheaper advertising and keep those communications going. I will say, however, though, easier said than done, because consumers will absolutely scrutinize your message. If we look at what they're expecting, 8 in 10 Australians think that brands have an important role to play during tough times. 80% of the market is expecting you to step up and show what you're doing. So I can't stress that enough, that if you are, and I assume most of you are, anything that you're doing to help families that have been negatively impacted, protecting your workers, anything that you're doing, now is the time to share that, because the consumers, 80% of them, expect you to play a part in the recovery. And on the flip side of that, 66% of Australians would abandon a brand if they're only perceived as acting in your own interest. So it's really, really difficult in terms of the communication. And yeah, this is the slide I need now. So the case to go out, to advertise more, is that it's cheaper. It's a great time to bring fresh marketing. You know what? People are at home more. They're watching more media. They're on their phones more. They're not commuting as much, things like that. So you can really reinforce with them. However, on the flip side, the big watch out is that if you come across as disingenuous, if you are just another cliche advert where it's, you know, soft, somber music, things like that, it's going to come across as fake, and it's going to have the opposite effect. So I know that the messaging I'm giving you is a bit contradictory here, saying go out and advertise, but make sure that you're authentic and genuine. A tough job for your marketing and your creative teams, but do get the message out there. I'm hopefully now going to talk you through some good examples of this. I think a lot of us would have seen the example from Aldi. And it's the helicopter flying in to save the day in these unprecedented times. And we're all so tired of the word unprecedented. And they just reassure us that their prices are going to remain the same, low as always. The same with Coles, who launched their helping lower the cost of dinner late last year. It was just perfect timing. These are the types of messages that we want to see. Here's an example from the GFC in 2008 and 2009, where Sainsbury's changed their "Try Something New Today" slogan to "Feed Your Family for a Fiver." It's understanding, it's empathetic, but it's not mushy-gushy, "Oh, you're struggling here, let's have a cheap dinner." These adverts went on to win numerous awards. I know we've had something similar here in Australia in previous years, and I think we'll start to see them again. But it's a great example of good marketing in a recessionary mindset. But this is my favorite. This is from the beauty category. This is Eva Longoria. Many of you will recognize. And she has been a brand ambassador for L'Oreal for many, many years. And now what they've done is they've sent her 2 mobile phones and the equipment for her to create her own advert, direct herself, star in it from home as she dyes her hair. Because building on the fact that, yes, you're stuck at home, but you're still worth it. You don't have to have your gray regrowth coming through. You can do it because you're truly worth it. I think this is a great example of a brand kind of capitalizing on the fact that we're at home, a messaging that shows you we're in this together. Even the superstars are at home with their roots regrowing or showing, but they can fix it. So a great advert of authenticity, and I think something that could perhaps be quite easily flipped across to food and grocery. Okay. So building on this, and I know I've talked about negative, pessimistic, impacted financially, but we're also sort of in an age where the small indulgences will do good. Life's too short to drink bad wine. People have got that attitude because, you know what, I'm not going out as much. I've decreased my spend on my commute. I'm not going on any big international holidays anymore. So you know what? I can have that premium ice cream. I can have Maggie beer. I can have another really good bottle of red wine because I'm saving money in different aspects. So we saw this in the last recession where small permissible extravagances actually did well. Granted, this was for the consumers that weren't as impacted, that did have that additional discretionary spend. So don't just think that it is all doom and gloom. If your brand is maybe a great small additional premium or indulgence, there's an opportunity for you to do well with those consumers that are looking to treat themselves and indulge themselves during the recession. And you've got to capitalize on the new digital marketing, right? And I think this is a really, really good example, the hashtag @HomeWithBarilla. And I think Gihan talked about it earlier in his presentation about getting celebrity chefs and cooking along. I have to admit, I've done it myself where I sent away for a box and cooked at home along Facebook. But it's how you maintain engagement with your brand. So Ashley Alexander, a celebrity chef for Barilla, you bought all the ingredients, logged into Facebook, and there she was, step by step, making the perfect night in with Italian. A great example, maintaining engagement, using the new social media platforms to do so. Okay, the third one I'm going to talk about, no surprises, is research from the guy who works for a research company. Everything has changed. I've stressed that enough. Your shopper over the last 3 months has gone through a significant period of readjustment. And as we re-enter the new normal, they've changed. So you need to understand who they are. Don't worry, I think I've only got 3 slides on the importance of research. So invest in market research to track how Australians are reassessing their priorities, reallocating their budgets, and switching between brands. We also need to understand, what does good value mean to them? Good value, as I've said, doesn't just mean the cheapest price. It means that I'm getting the most for my product. So we'll look at some examples in this space. Another way to do it, and this is a plug, without a doubt, what we're looking at here is the economic indicators that we can overlay or add to our shopper panel. So that if you think about, great, my brand has got 60% penetration in Australia. With that 60% penetration, not only can we overlay the demographics, the households, things like that, we can also overlay this economic indicator so that you can understand within your 60%, what percentage of them are really downtrodden, are cautious or worried, or are you lucky enough to have the bulk of your consumers in that savvy shopper or carefree where they're okay? Because this will impact how you talk to the consumers over the next 3, 9 months, maybe even a year. So this is something we can easily do, just overlaying that to your already your shoppers. And then you also, from a research point of view, and I think this is my last slide on the importance of research, but I think it's really, really important, is to understand the dispensability of your category or brand. You're going to fall into one of 4 segments. You're an essential. You are bread and milk and pasta. Who knows? But there's not going to be much change to you. People will continue to buy that. They may trade down to a private label or to a cheaper offering, but they're still going to buy you during this recession. On the flip side of that, or less preferable to be in, is permissible treats. Are you a gorgeous bottle of wine or really good cheese or something that you know what, I can justify that treating concept we spoke about earlier? Or do you perhaps fall into something we're calling postponables? It's a nice to have. You're no longer a need, you're a want. Is it something like fermented beverages or high protein yogurts that in previous months were so on trend, but right now they can wait? Or do you fall into the really unfavorable position of being an expendable? You know what? No, I don't need that. It's too tough. I'm not going to buy this particular product. So we are stressing the importance to understand where you are as a category and also as a brand in terms of dispensability. Cool. I think I'm doing okay for time. I think I've got about 6 minutes, one section, and then some chatting. I think that's right. So the next thing, or the last section I'm going to talk about is range. Now, apologies in advance. I know how hard all of you work to get additional range and to get more products on shelf. And now our recommendation during a recession is to actually pull back some of those less or some of those SKUs that aren't actually as successful in order to put your top velocity products on there. Because you don't want to have a situation where your top selling product is off shelf, out of stock, and you've got a poor performing product just sitting there, but no one's really buying it. Also, we talk about the importance of innovation. Now in a recession, like we saw with Colgate and their little automatic weird toothbrush wisp thing, don't underestimate the importance of innovation. Consumers will still be willing to try things. And also remember, we've gone through such a significant period of change that there may be opportunities for your product in a new iteration, in a new pack time. Think about all the change and think about the opportunity that presents from an innovation point of view. So yes, range rationalization and innovation. Use those extra trade dollars to support innovation. Think about what consumers are doing now that they weren't doing previously. That means an opportunity. At-home dinner parties. What does that mean for you? So some examples of really timely innovation is, from left to right. So Nesquik recently moved into paper packaging. Great timing. In terms of after the bushfire, where a lot of Australians were really, really mindful of the environmental impact and sustainability and things like that. They've done the same thing with their Smarties chocolate bar on paper, recyclable. So you've now got this aspect of a trend being delivered, and it's got that feel-good factor. I get to buy Nesquik, I get to eat a chocolate bar, and it's not bad for the environment anymore. Pat on the back to me because I've made this choice. The example then from Müller yogurt. Now, Icelandic style yogurt has sort of been around for a while. I remember in my trends career talking about it years ago, but you can see this is a big company doubling down and really stepping into this trend. So they're investing in their corner cup yogurts, but with a new type of yogurt, skyr, which is Icelandic yogurt. And then White Claw, big trend in the States, and they're coming to Australia in the second half of this year. So it's a hard seltzer. For those of you that aren't familiar, it's basically a sparkling water, slightly flavored, but it is alcoholic. So it's tapping into that health and wellness trends. Yes, alcohol categories too tend to be less impacted by recessions. So they're still going to go ahead and they're going to launch into Australia with this healthy, fruity, light drink that is good for you, but still delivering on that alcohol, that adult drinking occasion. So these are just some really good examples of innovation. The other local example here is from Other Side Brewery, who said, just because we're going through a tough time, just because you're stuck at home, doesn't mean you have to stop drinking craft beer. You get $40. For $40, you get 18 cans delivered, simple. And you can see it's a really simple, clean packaging. It really resonates. They've moved from online only to picking up some physical distribution. So the other thing, just to drive home that point about value, I don't want to see big, like in the tea there, value pack red and yellow. It's not just about that. It's bigger pack sizes in terms of durable or efficacious or used by this particular celebrity like Eva Longoria. Communicate value and what value means to your consumer beyond just the price thing. Also, difficult times, recessionary times present an opportunity for acquisition. there are a lot of small companies that are not going to make it through this. And this is big. This is a great opportunity for some of the more established with bigger pockets to actually acquire some of those brands. So don't be scared of actually investing and acquiring some of these products during this time. So to wrap up, everyone, I hope you stayed with me. I've been trying to speak slowly. To wrap up, I'll say is defend your value proposition. Don't get into a mudslinging competition of decreasing. You'll do damage to your brand in the long run. Shrewdly advertise. Don't go quiet. Capitalize on the cheap advertising when other companies and competitors may go quiet. Yes, research through the recession. Everything has changed. You need to understand what your consumers value. And the only way to do that is to research. Boom, plug. And then also to streamline your range. Don't have your poorer performing products taking up space when you can have your top selling products there, generating that increased sales, that velocity. And also don't underestimate the importance of innovation now in a time of recession. So basically, to sum it all up, it's to cut your unnecessary spending and invest in ways that will genuinely spur growth. The presentation is an extract of all the research we've been doing. That's a link where you can download the full version as well as all of our previous content on this. Thank you all so much. I think we're going to have questions now, if that's okay, I believe.
Yes, absolutely. Am I on? Yes, I am. Hello, Justin. We have a question here from Andrew, who says, with all this data, how do you select what data to focus on and what data is best for your business?
I'm so sorry. Can I get that one more time?
Yep. The question is, with all this data, how do you select what data to focus on and what is best for your business?
Thank you. Great question. And there's not a simple generic answer. I suppose what we're recommending is to now sort of reassess. Everything you thought you knew may not be applicable because your consumer has changed so significantly. No simple answer there. Understand how your customers' priorities have changed, what value means to them, and then act on that is the best I can do, I'm afraid.
We've had lots of fantastic feedback about you, Justin. People have loved this presentation. So if you would like to get your questions in, you've got a few more moments to do so. We've got a question from Darren Kerno. Did ready meals see much impact from isolation?
Yes, great question. We initially saw, so in that initial phase where it was pantry stocking and partying, there was almost just this wild abandon and people would buy anything. Once that stabilized, though, the ready meals sort of took a dip. And what we saw was, because I'm at home, I've got time to cook. We saw fresh meat, fresh poultry, fresh everything do really well. And we saw the boom of at-home cooking because we've got time. I think the ready meals did well over the initial panic purchasing, but that tapered off. In the link into all the presentations, we actually do the top 10 growth categories, and you can see over the 4 different stages of the recession how they changed from toilet paper and pasta through to fresh and poultry. So that is in the full presentation as well.
I have another question for you from David. Has there been a shift in response between traditional advertising and social media during the crisis?
Great question, David. I actually can't comment. I'm not really, it's not my area of expertise. I think, though, what has worked is that the online channels have done well. You know, previously we saw a decline in channels like Facebook, where older millennials were moving to alternative platforms. And now, out of boredom, being stuck at home, we actually saw a surge in those younger demographics going back onto Facebook because they didn't have actually anything else to do. The contrast between traditional and online, I'm so sorry, I can't really comment. I think it might be touched upon in one of our reports, though.
We've had a question too. We have the download link again?
Yes, I can. I'll put that up there. I think
I think a PDF version of my presentation will be made available, and that link there takes you to the full. We've been publishing content now since it all started. There's maybe 4 or 5 different pieces, and you can see the trend as it plays out. So I'm happy to leave that up there, and I'm sure the amazing organisers will also maybe just pop that out.
Sure they will. We've got a question here from Sharon. It's not really a question, it's more of a statement. She says, great presentation, thanks Justin, and you're looking very toned, which is obviously a reference again to the water polo. So well done, Sharon. I like to see a woman who's as politically incorrect as me on the forum. That is wonderful. Another question. I mean, we've had lots of fantastic feedback, Justin. If your ego's getting pumped up enough, we're pumping up your tyres enough. We've also said here, great insight. Don't apologise for plugging research. It's very important, and it obviously is. That's why you're here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
It's been great. Thank you so much. Can we have a round of applause for Justin Nell? Thank you so much.